Hello everybody, this is Barry Johns and this is Studio Talk. Welcome to the second session in my RME TotalMix training sessions. Let me say this first, and this is super important. If you have not watched session 1 in this training series, do not watch this video yet. Stop right now, go back and watch that video from beginning to end, and then practice over and over everything that I demonstrate there. I'm not saying this to get more views on another video. This is to help you, okay? You cannot just jump into the middle without getting the other basics behind it first. It's going to be very important. If you want to learn TotalMix, you're going to have to invest your time and your effort, and then also in watching the videos, but also in practicing the things that I show you. You've invested a lot of money in an amazing RME interface. Now it's time to learn how to get it to its potential. TotalMix has tremendous potential for you, really only limited by your creativity. So go back and watch that video. Then after you've practiced everything and you've got all of that down, then and only then come back to this one. I'll put a link in the description below, or you can just search YouTube, RME TotalMix sessions, first session example, okay? Or just search my channel. But the bottom line, go to the description below. It's the easiest way to find it. Now, this video, without a doubt, is going to be the most important video in this training series. Once you understand what I'm going to show you in this video, that should get you over that hump and really make things start to become more crystal clear. I cannot emphasize enough about practicing with this, doing everything I demonstrate for you. Go crazy with it, because you know if you've watched the first video, you can always get back to square one if you mess everything up and you're not sure. Today's video is going to be regarding routing within TotalMix, as well as understanding the very very important matrix window, and understanding how that is also another way to look at all of your routing within TotalMix, okay? This one should launch you, man. I mean, get you into the atmosphere once you fully grasp it and understand it. So let's head back to the computer and let's check that out. So what I'm going to show you right now, and to get your head wrapped around it, is the most important thing that you need to learn to get yourself over that hump to TotalMix, to where it should all start to come pretty clear to you at this point after you fully wrap your head around it, and that's going to be the matrix view. So like I showed you in session 1 of the video series, this top row here are the inputs of your interface. Mine happens to be a UFX Plus, and you can see right here, I'm in mic 9 of the UFX Plus, and this is my level of the audio here. I'll show you again where it's actually recording it as we talk right now. So let's go back over here to TotalMix. Then this middle row here, those are your software playbacks. That's what that is for. And then down below, here are your interface outputs. Now, I've done what's called the total reset. I talked about that in the last video. If you're not sure how to do that, you go up here to options, go down here to reset mix, and do a total reset. So I'm starting from square one here where I have no routing. Now, I told you in the very beginning, unless you know exactly what you're trying to do, you need to leave these faders alone. And I was very serious with that. That's where the danger can happen and get you confused right away. So until you understand what's happening by the end of this video, you will clearly understand that. Do not touch these faders. Now, when looking at what I'm going to route mic 9 to, as you can see here right now, the fader level is down to 0, right? And so that's why I can't hear myself here in the studio. Of course, I wouldn't want to hear myself here in the studio because I'd get feedback. And so ultimately, I've got that volume down, even though I've got my input signal coming in. And you would expect that like you would in your digital audio workstation. But right now, the default output for every single fader here, whether it's the inputs or whether it's a software playback, is being routed to analog 1 and 2. Now, if I go down here, my analog 1 and 2 are my main outputs of my interface, and it's what's feeding my monitors in my studio. So I've got that also down to 0 here, where currently I'm not listening to anything. And so that is both software playback as well as the outputs down here below. Now your software playback, if you can see right here, they're all defaulted to unity gain. So in other words, if you route something to a software playback, the fader is going to automatically be up. So as this is going to analog 1 and 2 currently, I've got analog 1 and 2 for my outputs. This is my computer outputs that's ultimately going down here to my main outputs here. So as I turn this up, again, I have analog 1 and 2 selected. I'll show you how to select other channels here in a second. But no matter what I do, and now if I adjust any faders anywhere in here, if I adjust any of these faders, it's going to feed whatever's at that signal to analog 1 and 2. So if I wanted 9 to go to analog 1 and 2, I'd bring up the fader. If I wanted AES to go to 1 and 2, I'd bring up the fader. If I wanted 8, 9, and 10 to go to 1 and 2, I would bring up the fader. And then all of those particular channels, whatever is connected to the input source, whatever audio that is, would be routed to analog 1 and 2 out, all right? So you'll notice here, once I start to bring this up, now I'm still not hearing it in the room, and that is mainly because I don't have any volume down here. If I were to start to bring my volume up, you're going to hear that feedback now start to come back in. And so that's how you're routing things. Now, if I to choose where any place else I may want to route this, as an example, right, I brought my fader up, so that's automatically feeding my main outputs 1 and 2 here. But let's say, for example, I also want that mic to go to other particular inputs or outputs within TotalMix. Then I could simply drop down this drop-down key, and then all of my outputs are listed right down here. So I can feed it to anywhere I want. Now, an example why I may want to do that, if I wanted to create a monitor mix as an example, a separate monitor mix, I could choose, headphones 9 and 10. And so when I choose headphones 9 and 10, now I can create a monitor mix. So it's going to go to both analog 1 and 2 and then 9 and 10. So if I select 9 and 10 here, you'll notice that my software playback all went down to 0. And if I were to bring that up at this point, you can see how that is now feeding 9 and 10. And so I can bring that back down. Well, let's just leave that up for a second. So currently right now, I'm feeding my mic 9 to 2 output sources. I'm feeding to analog 1 and 2, and I'm feeding it to 9 and 10. Now, those can be separate levels. As an example, let's go back here and stay in 9 and 10, and let's leave the fader right about down there. And if I go back up here and then I choose analog 1 and 2, well, bam, my fader is where I had it set for analog 1 and 2. Again, if I go down here and I choose 9 and 10, then now it's back down for that particular level there. Now, this is why you just don't start turning, adjusting faders when you don't know what you're doing, because I could literally have this thing routed 30 different ways to Sunday and forgot that I completely did it. But the easiest way to tell what a particular channel is being routed to is just to choose this, and there will be a check mark beside everywhere that is currently being routed to. This is super, super, super important. Now, from here as an example, there's another view of this, and that's called matrix view, where you can kind of see all of the routing that's happening at one time in your session amongst all of your particular inputs and your outputs, as well as your software playback. So let's go up here and let's choose matrix view. Now, if you see here, there's a shortcut there. You type the letter X and you go to matrix view, or you type the letter M, you go to mixer view, which we're currently in. So I'm going to choose this, and I'm going to go to the matrix view. Now, once I get to the matrix view, here's an important thing to understand. The labeling of all of my analog inputs, or all of my inputs, I should say, whether they're analog or digital, right here, and I can scroll up and down until I see all of them, all of those analog inputs. So down here below are all of my analog outputs. And then I can scroll across through here and then scroll down as an example where I'm seeing all of my analog outputs. As you can see right here, and you can see down here, I have my labeling for all of my outputs. These are all of my outputs down here. And so up here is an example. See how I've got mic 9? Well, what this is saying is I'm going through both channels, 2 channels, at minus 6.3. That's my fader that was in the mixer view that we saw just a second ago. It's minus 6.3. And what that's doing is it's coming down here and feeding my main outputs. So see that? So you come over here, then you scroll down, and that's showing that it's feeding your main outputs. Again, over here, remember, we have the same mic 9, but remember how I routed that to the phones? Well, if you go down through here, it's going to the left and the right of the phones. Now, let's say, for example, you're trying to figure out what's going on. You can come in here and you can see this. Now, be careful clicking in this area and then adjusting your scroll wheel, because you can actually adjust levels here, so know that you can. As an example, let's say, for example, I want to bring that up or down. I'm adjusting my scroll wheel on my mouse, and I'm adjusting that up and down. So I'm actually changing the level. So if I change that back, let's say, for example, I go back down to down below 8.3 as an example, and I go back over to my mixer view, and now I can see it was analog 1 and 2, and now I can see whether my fader had been adjusted down or below. So let's go back over here one more time. Let's go to our matrix view, and let's take that down, let's say there, right? And now if I go back over here to my mixer view, we're going to see where my fader has now been brought back down. So what that is a visual representation of where your faders, what faders you have active and where you have them routed to, as to being able to understand that and see that clearly in one view. Now, if you want to eliminate that routing, just double click there. And if I double click there, and now if I go back up here to my mixer view, we're going to see that my fader is now back down to 0. If I select this, you can see I don't have anything routed as my selection. So when you're lost and you're hearing things and you're not sure what in the world is going on, go up here to your matrix view and get a visual understanding. Now, this is going to take some time to wrap your head around it initially. Now, if you notice here, all of the outputs, all of the outputs through here are routed to 1 and 2, your main output. So every output is defaulted routing to analog 1 and 2. And then down through here, it's also routed to its particular corresponding channel. So ADAT 1 and 2, as an example, is going to come over here, and then you can see here where it's feeding this. Now, the faders are set to 0 on all of these. And again, as I scroll across, so it's a quick indicator of what's going on. So I'm going to go back for a second, and I'm going to go back to my mixer view, and I'm just going to start goofing off for a second. I'm going to start bringing up these things here and just bring up random ones. Oh, what does this do? Let me go down to there. Let me do that and that and that. Oh, I can't figure out what, I'm acting like I can't figure out where is this channel going to. It's not going to where I thought it was. It's very confusing. Oops, didn't mean to hit that. And then scroll up and down, and then I come back over here and I keep going down to try to find these things, but I'm not understanding what's going on. Well, here, if I go back to my matrix view, we're going to see all of that routing, whereas mic 12, as an example, is feeding its main outputs, but and then you go to AES, is feeding 8 at 9 and 10, and then also feeding 9 and 10 are 8 at 5 and 6, and 8 at 7 and 8. As well as over here, we've got Mike 10 feeding Maddie 9 and 10, and we also have these others feeding Maddie 9 and 10. So again, as I told you before, we can go back in here, or we can go to operations. We can either click each one of them one at a time, or we can reset the individual routing in a different way too. So let's go back to the mixer window and let's take a look at that. Okay, so here we are back as an example, and let's take Mike 10 as an example. Now, one thing to note, this is going to remain, all the outputs or all the inputs, as well as the software playback, are going to remain on whatever was selected most recently, and that happened to be Maddie 31 and 32. So if I look at Mike 10 here and I go back over to my matrix view, and if I go to Mike 10 as an example and I scroll across, here we're going to see Mike 10 is routed to Maddie 9 and 10, but let's keep going across, and we're going to see here that Maddie 9 and 10 is also routed to Maddie 31 and 32. So Mike 9 is routed to quite a few particular outputs here. So let's go back to our mixer window and let's look at Mike 10. Here we can see as an example, it's routed to 31 and 32. It's also routed to 9 and 10. And those are the two that it's routed to. So if I want to, as an example, erase all of the routing for this particular channel, and that's Mike 10. If I want to erase all of the routing of that particular input, I can right-click, and here I can clear input mix of Mike 10. So any routing that I have there, I can hit that and clear it. And so now you notice that fader just popped back down to all the way back down again, and you'll see here all of my routing is now gone. There is no more routing. So that's a way to do it one channel at a time. You can do it that way, or you can go back to matrix view and you can basically eliminate all these routings by double clicking on them one at a time, and you can get rid of them that way, or depending on where you're at with it, you could do a total reset, and then that would eliminate all of your routing. Now, when you're doing that, you want to make sure you scroll across and you see everything, and scroll all the way across here down below, and then come all the way down here, and then scroll back across again to make sure you don't have any other routing. That way you're seeing everything on this particular screen. So hopefully that can explain to you how you can get a visual sense of how things are routed within TotalMix and just how powerful this particular window can be in your workflow within TotalMix. All right, so let's talk about routing a little bit more, because you notice when let me scroll back over here, and we're all the way to the back, and here I've got Mike 9 and Mike 10. Well, I'm going to route Mike 9 here to a few other locations. So we're going to take it and we're going to send it to analog 3 and 4. And we're going to route that out to 3 and 4. Now, if I come down here, 3 and 4 is set up as a stereo output, a stereo series. But if I hit my toolbar, I can now change this to mono. So now I've got an output 3 and an output 4. So now if I come to Mike 9, I can route to either 3 or 4. So again, to change a particular channel from stereo to mono, if I do this toolbar right here and I change that back to stereo, now 3 and 4 are together, all right? But for right now, let's leave that set to a mono output, because most likely that is how you're going to use most of your inputs and your outputs. You're going to use those as mono IO for the most part. Okay, so now we're going to route this out we're going to route it down to analog 3. So I'm now going to raise that, And so now you can see down below, now that's being routed to analog 3. So mic 9 is now routed to analog 3. I'm also going to route that to analog 4. I'm going to bring my fader up. So now it's now routed to 4. Now, no routing actually occurs until you raise your fader. That's what's going to activate that particular routing choice. Otherwise, it won't be activated. And so it's important to understand that as you're working. Now, okay, so as an example here, we talked about our routing of mic 9. Currently, it's going to 3 and 4, which is also represented visually down here. Now, let's say, for example, I have other particular channels. Let's say, for example, I'm going to want ADAT3 to also have that exact same routing as well as the exact same fader levels. So I can go down to here and I can right click over top of this and I can choose copy input mic 9. Now I can go over to ADAT3 and over here I can choose paste input mix of ADAT9. So here you can see now 3 and 4 are both routed. You can see the fader differences right there. And 4 are also being routed to 3 and 4 down below. So I'm duplicating that across if I need to do the same type of routing. And where that can get handy as an example is if you're doing a particular monitor mix later on for somebody and you want to do it in TotalMix versus doing it within your digital audio workstation. You can do that right here. Of course, you have 0 latency and you can apply both reverb as well as echo if you needed to that monitor mix. So everyone could hear exactly what they wanted to hear. So ADAT3 as an example would go to the drummer. Let's use that as an example. Mono signal out to the drummer's headphone, and 4 could go out to a monitor headphone mix for, let's say, the guitarist or the bassist or whatever. Then you can route. So there's going to be some fundamental things that you're going to want across the board. But as an example, a drummer's not going to necessarily need to hear most of their drum kit. They need to hear all the other instruments, whereas everyone else needs to hear the drum kit, most likely because they're most likely probably not tracking in the same room with the drums, okay? So understanding this part of it, both the matrix view here is understanding that it's vital. Again, my outputs are being represented right here. Mic 9 is going to output 3 and 4. We can see that there. And then remember, ADAT3 is also going to 3 and 4, as you can see represented down here as I scroll across. And this clearly shows you all of your routing. This is probably the most important thing you're going to need to fully wrap your head around before going one step further in TotalMix. There's going to be other things coming out in a future video, in another session completely, that's going to deep dive into some other things, as well as routing internal inputs and outputs from both the DAW as well as inputs or outputs, physical inputs, outputs being fed to your interface at one time, and I'll get deep into that in another video. But for right now, really learn the difference, or at least how to understand the routing and how to view it between your mixer view and between your matrix view. Super important. All right, so now you maybe have not gotten full grasp of what's going on yet. You may have to watch this video several times potentially to totally let it sink in. You need to absorb this and think about it. But once you find that you've got a good understanding of it, start practicing like I mentioned in the intro to this particular video. I think this area is going to help you the most without question. And I would have given anything to have session 1 and session 2 when I got started. And there will be a session 3 and a session 4. And beyond that later on down the road, depending on what your needs are. But hopefully this has helped you today. If it has helped you, if my other videos helped you and this one's helped you, do me a favor, subscribe to the channel. Also, do me a favor, leave some comments down below. Let me know what you think about it. Let me know if there's any other questions I haven't gotten to yet. Now understand, I get a lot of comments across my videos and I don't always have the time to respond to all of them. So know that I read every one of them. I just don't always have the time to respond. And so Again, thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. My goal is to help people like you because I've needed that help at various times in my journey through all of this. So until next time, hope every one of you have a great day. Bye-bye.